Specifically, we'll take a look at the Tasks API, a new part of the document API called the change feed. Switch a little bit to Google Apps Script and take a look at some of the newer features that have been added there. An API that we launched about a month ago called the Picker API, which is a great way to integrate with Google Docs, and then talk a little bit about some of the changes that have been happening in the Google Apps Marketplace as well. So who here actually uses Google Apps? Oh, awesome. OK, so that's pretty much everyone. All right, so for the very few who don't, just a quick overview. It's our online collaboration and communication suite. That includes things like Gmail, Groups, Contacts, Calendar, Google Docs. It is in use by more than 3 million businesses. We sign up about 4,000 new businesses every day. There's about 40 million active users, very popular in small businesses, but we also have some very large customers on there as well. Last year, this is a great thing about software as a service. We added over 200 new features last year. I don't know what our pace is for this year, but there's been a lot of really interesting features added so far. But a lot of cool stuff in the pipeline as well. And we do understand that this is critical for businesses, so it does have a 99.9% uptime guarantee, and I think last year we're just shy of 4 nines and are on pace to exceed this again this year. So Google Apps is part of our vision for how we think businesses should run their software, which is 100% of their applications running in the cloud. We see Google Apps as part of that, but of course, that's not everything that people need to run a business, right? You still need accounting and financing and project management, let alone hundreds or thousands of applications that are specific to industries. If you're in pharmaceuticals or legal, we can't build all that. It's just not our expertise. We don't have the resources to do all that. So part of this vision is Google Apps, but it's also applications that are built by third parties, and those we make available in our apps marketplace, as well as custom applications that people build for their own companies. And we offer Google App Engine as part of that. And of course, being that this is all in the cloud, we expect these are modern web applications accessed with modern browsers like Chrome and Chrome OS, or on mobile devices like Android. So we do have some tools that we offer as part of this vision. Beyond just our Google Apps suite, we have ways for people to customize UIs. Part of this is with open social gadgets. These are just HTML and JavaScript that you can embed inside applications like Gmail, sites, calendar, and spreadsheets. To build those, we have the Google Web Toolkit, and we also have AppScript, which has some UI capabilities in it. Obviously, we have a lot of data in Google Apps that you want to do things with. So each of those have APIs. For custom business logic, App Engine, and again, AppScript. How many people have used AppScript before? OK, almost nobody. So AppScript is actually kind of cool. It's a JavaScript engine that runs in the cloud. So you can basically run JavaScript code to do automation, runs in basically inside Google Docs, and it's the really cool part of it is it's free. And you can actually build web apps with it, and I have a little demo that I'll show in a bit. And underlying all this are some key infrastructure. The two most important ones are basically identity for single sign-on, so people can log into all these applications, and OAuth for sharing data. So those are the tools. I want to take a look at one in particular, which is a new API that we launched back in May, is the Tasks API. And the reason this is important, it's not so much that there's all that many interesting things you can do with tasks, but it represents a new style of API that we're moving to. So has anyone here done any programming with the Google Data Protocol? Any of the APIs, calendar, contacts? OK, so a few of you. So the Google Data Protocols were developed a few years ago, and with the best of intentions, was built on top of some existing standards. So one is the Atom Publishing Protocol, which is a syndication format that was used like basically a newer version of RSS. But it turned out to be really complicated. There were some other standards that were brought in, and it just made it really hard for developers. If you used one of our client libraries, you were OK, but if you were in a language like Ruby, where we don't have a library for those, you basically had to deal with a lot of this complexity yourself. So the new APIs are much simpler. we basically learned from what the industry is doing with APIs out there and other services. It's a simple REST API with a very, very simple JSON format. We've expanded the number of client libraries we have. So now, in addition to Java and .NET, there's also Python, PHP, and Ruby. These are all designed to work with OAuth 2, which is a much simpler version of the OAuth protocol that is an emerging standard. It has features like partial updates and partial responses, which are great if you're using these APIs in an environment like a mobile application where bandwidth is limited, and you only want to send just those changes, or if it's just those changes that are important for your application. I'll show you an example of that. And we have some new tools for developers to make using these APIs easier. So tasks are really simple, right? You have a list, and I could have many lists to organize my tasks. But lists are just collections, right? And those are collections of tasks, which have a name, a description, a due date, whether or not I've completed it. Really simple. When it comes to the API, these translate into two objects. We have list and task. And this is basically what the JSON is. Really, the only thing new here is just in an API, we have an ID. These are a unique ID that for each resource or for each object. And we use that to construct URLs to when we want to modify those objects. So if, for example, I wanted to find all of my task lists, so I have my personal list, I have my work list, I might have one for each project, I would just make a call to a URL. I would get tasks, which is the API. This is version 1 since it's very new. Our top level collection are users. @me is a placeholder. It's a shortcut to say just whoever the current user is. And lists. So we just get all those, and I will get every task list for me. If I want to find the content of one of those, I would take that ID and I'd plug it into the URL to get the content of that list. So we'll see a sample of what this actually looks like. The full API is probably really hard to read in the back. But basically, this just looks like any other RESTful API on the web, right? You can get objects, you can get collections, you can post to create them, you can do puts for updates, and delete to delete. And this is really easy. The nice thing is that this style of API is actually being uniformly adopted across a whole set of Google APIs. So things like the Google Plus API that was just launched has a very similar style. And we're also looking, as we do updates to the existing Google APIs like Calendar and Contacts and Docs, we're going to move to a very similar style. So basically, once you learn one of these APIs, it's actually very easy to move on to the others. So here we actually see a little bit of snippet of how this looks in different client libraries. On the left is basically the raw protocol. So this is getting all of the list in the user's default, or all of the tasks in the user's default list. You can see it's really simple. It's just a get. We get back a simple JSON object where items contains each of the items in the list. In Java, we would just call the task service, the list method, and then execute it. And then we iterate over it. In PHP, nearly identical code. And if we were to do this in Python, if we were to do this in Ruby, it would basically look the same in all of those languages. There's a lot more standardization, a lot more uniformity as you move between different languages. Same for JavaScript as well. So one cool new thing, and this is a great tool if you want to learn about any of our APIs, is the Google APIs Explorer. And I'll just launch this and give you a quick demo. But what this is it's an online tool that contains both documentation as well as the ability to actually execute methods on those APIs. So you can go through and you can just pick an API. We'll try tasks. And I'll pick version 1. It has a link to the documentation. Let's zoom in a little bit. And I'm just going to try calling a method here. But you notice this failed, right? So I got back an error. It says you're not authorized. And we get our JSON body here that says login is required. Well, that's easy enough to do. I'm just going to switch to private access here. And this will allow me to authorize the tool to access my personal data. So now if I just retry that, you get back an OK. So So I have one list. This is just my list of personal tasks. And if I want to go get the content of that, I can then go back up here and pick a different method. And we'll just say, we'll try this one. And you can see here when you do the parameters, it actually tells you which ones are required and which ones are optional. So it's just a great way to explore the API. Now I can execute this. Go back down here. You can see my OAuth header, the response code. And this is a very, very short set of things to do, but there's my one task on it. So you can do this with other APIs as well. You can use this with like the Translate API, any of the new APIs that are using this new style. It's a really awesome tool. Oops. And I don't want to log into my VPN. So another companion tool to this is our API console. And again, I'll just go and easier to show than it is to talk about. So this is basically a developer tool that is used by all of our new APIs. And allows you to organize your projects, particularly if you're using something that uses a lot of different APIs in your application. Wi-Fi is a little slow, but that's OK. So it's going to load up. This is just a sample project that I have here. You can see all the different APIs that are integrated with the console. And I've turned on a few here. So I've turned on tasks. But you can do a bunch of stuff here. So you can actually invite other developers to work with you. You can control the level of access, whether or not they can make changes to your project, whether or not they're considered an owner and can invite other people. You can set up your OAuth keys and secrets here. You can actually get some reporting on how your API is being used. I don't actually have any requests on this particular project, so the chart is not very interesting. But if you had a real application that was in production, you would actually see charts of how you're using APIs. And the reason why that's important is a lot of these APIs have quotas, and so you want to know if you're using it, whether or not you have to request additional quota for your application. And you can see here in the quota section, how you're using towards your capacity. And so that way you just manage a little bit your resource utilization just a little bit better. So it's a really handy tool. All of the new APIs integrate with this, and something that is really good to be familiar with. I mentioned partial response and partial update. Turns out this is actually really easy to do. It is a feature that was in the existing Google Data Protocol. It just wasn't very widely adopted. So some APIs had it, some APIs didn't, and it was just up to each individual engineering team to decide whether or not they wanted to implement this feature. Going forward, this is something that will be universally available in all of our APIs. If I just want to get a subset of data, it's really easy. I just add in my query parameter fields, and then I tell it which ones I want to do. And there's actually a notation that you can request. You can specify which attributes in a collection you want to do. So in this case, I want to get just the ID and title of every item in the items collection. And depending on the structure of the return data, you can get as simple or as complex as you want. Doing a partial update is even easier. You just do a patch command in HTTP, and you just send the data that changed. Anything that you omit is considered unchanged. So this way, if you're doing a mobile application, you can really save a lot of bandwidth by doing this. If you combine it with something like gzip compression, the amount of data that you need to send in order to use these APIs in a constrained environment like a mobile application is pretty much as close to minimal as possible. So there's another API that I want to talk about briefly, and this is really for cases of people doing like document synchronization, right? If you want to keep, you happen to have a system where you want to attach documents to, say, a CRM or a project management tool, but you want to know whenever those those documents change. So the change feed makes this a lot easier. This is it's a read-only feed, so you can't make any changes to it, but you can basically just find out for a given user anytime a document has changed that either they own or if it's a doc that's been shared with them. And that's the important part. It was actually easy. It was actually possible to do this before. There's actually a query parameter in a lot of the APIs that allows you to say, get me anything that changed since a certain date. And you can just keep doing that over and over. Docs had a hole where that would only work if the user owned the data. If it was something that was shared with them, then you would miss those changes. And you had to do a lot of hacks to work around that. Other APIs don't have this problem, which is why this API is only added to the documents list. And the central concept is just a change stamp. It's just a counter. Every time there's a change, that counter gets incremented, and you can use that to request anything that changed since the last value that you saw. This is just a heavily edited version of the XML. You can see even if I took a lot of the details out, it's still very complicated, which is why I really am excited that we're moving to JSON. But you can just see the key things here are the change stamps. There's a master one, which is the max for that result set, and then each item in the list has its own number as well. This is a kind of a special API that most people aren't going to deal with, but if you are dealing with documents, this is a good API to know about. So I want to switch to a different style of API, which is AppScript. Since not many people used it here, just a quick intro to it. It is JavaScript, server-side JavaScript engine, runs in Google Apps, runs on our infrastructure. And it was really designed for things like workflow and automation. Part of the AppScript environment is a really rich set of APIs for dealing with all of the different Google services, including everything in Google Apps, but also some of the new services, the new APIs that we have for doing things like BigQuery that you heard about at the keynote, even the URL shortener. Pretty much any Google API can be called very easily within AppScript. So one of the new APIs is actually a Gmail service for AppScript. And you can actually think of this as almost like running procmail. I don't know how many people have ever used procmail on Unix. It's basically a great little way to do email automation. Basically run a script whenever you get an email. And so now in AppScript, you actually have read and write access to your inbox. And then you can just program it from within JavaScript. And if you use Gmail, then you're familiar with the API. It's the same exact concepts. You can compose, you have inboxes, you can star and unstar, you have labels, and you can search. The main entry point is a class called Gmail app, and you have 3 classes: threads, messages, and labels. Threads are messages, and you can obviously have multiple labels, the same as in Gmail. So let's just take a look at a little bit of JavaScript. Let's say you just wanted to get all of the new messages in your inbox and just flatten them into just a big list of messages. So we would just call Gmail app.search, and the search expression is the same expression that we use in Gmail. So we say in inbox and is starred, or not starred, is unread. This gives us all of the unread messages in our inbox. And we can go then loop through the threads for each thread, loop through the messages, push them into an array. Now we have one list of all of our unread messages that we can then just start doing some other processing with. And we can maybe want to do some automatic labeling with the prediction API. So we'll feed it into a prediction API, get back a label that will then apply. We could send replies to these messages. So we can do autoresponders based on custom logic that we write in JavaScript. A lot of cool stuff that you can do with it. Another new service is the document app, which allows you to read and write documents. So you can create documents, you can open them, and then once you have a document, you have full access to its content. And this is actually structured content. So you can do things like deal with paragraphs and do formatting with the headers. You can even create tables. Really good use case for this is something like a document template. So if you want to do like a basic mail merge, or you want to do some automation where you send out customized versions of documents. This is a screenshot from a demo that was done at I/O for a mortgage quoting app. And I actually wrote my own version of this for this, that the template will look a little bit different, but I'll show it in just a few minutes. But the code for this is pretty straightforward. So once you have, in this case, what we're doing is given a document, given by its ID, we make a copy of it, open it, get the body, and then we go through and call replace text. And you can actually do regular expressions and fairly complex matching. But in this case, we just take in a hash of key value pairs and just treat those as strings that we want to replace. And now we have basically mail merge, and just a few lines of JavaScript. We also added charts. Charts are pretty easy to do. You can just create a data table, define the columns and add rows. In this case, static data. But you could also pull in data from spreadsheets. There's a spreadsheets API in AppScript. You can make query. We actually can call any URL service, so you can actually get data from any web service out there. If you have a database behind your firewall, you can actually have a JDBC API that can be accessed through a product called Secure Data Connector. And you could actually call and fetch data from databases behind your firewall. Once you have data, you just call one of the builders for a chart, in this case, a column chart. You set your data table, and then you customize it for how you want to display it, and you have a chart. And I'll show this in the demo in just a minute. The last thing I want to mention is the UI services, and there is an experimental feature which is basically a drag and drop UI builder that ends up building GWT UIs. And this is all in AppScript. It is experimental. There are some things that you can't do very easily in there yet, but for prototyping or for just defining the layout for an AppScript application, it works pretty well. Once you do it once you design your UI, you can basically create an application. In this case, we're just creating a really simple web application. That's what the doGet method does, and we can publish this as a service. So we create our UI, we load our component, add it into the canvas, and we have a web page. And it's actually that easy. So what this looks like is, let's go over to, oops. So this is a really, very basic UI that I designed in the UI builder. Excuse my poor UI design skills here. But I'm going to request a quote for a mortgage. Say I want a $200,000 loan for 30 years. And when I submit this, what it's going to do is actually going to send me a customized quote. We'll send a little PDF. And it generates just a chart which shows how much of my payments are principal versus interest. And so that's done using the Charts API. And using the Gmail services and the Doc services, I emailed a PDF that contains my customized quote. So I can actually go into my email here and click on the quote. And here it is with all my values, my interest rate, and my monthly payments. And so this PDF is actually just a Google Doc with placeholders in there that when I submitted that form, I went through and I took that templating method that I showed earlier, went through and I substituted values and converted it to a PDF and sent it. All of that was done in about maybe 75 or 100 lines of JavaScript. So not a lot of code to write small applications. If you're doing simple workflow automation apps, take a look at AppScript. It's a really interesting technology. The team working on it is constantly adding new features. And the really cool part is it's free. So it's basically getting a free hosting environment for applications in the cloud. Let's see. A few things I didn't actually have time to do really much on here because these were actually just announced probably 4 or 5 days ago, is support for some additional API. So like the Tasks API is actually, there's a very simple API for using that within AppScript. But you could also call our prediction services, our BigQuery for analyzing terabytes of data, and do lots of, so really simple use case. You can upload your data, it could be terabytes, analyze it with BigQuery, and then build a really simple UI around it using charts to visualize your data. And you can just do that very, very easily with AppScript. A different style of API. This is actually not a server-side API in the same sense of what we've been looking at, but it's a new component that we added. It's basically a JavaScript widget, which makes it really easy to integrate with Google Docs. And it's called our Picker API. And now it's maybe about a month and a half ago, but we didn't really have a lot of fanfare around it. There's still some work that needs to be done on it, but it's actually really cool. And this is just a screenshot I took from just a demo app I was working on. Basically a user can go to your application, click a link, and they'll be presented with a list of their Google Docs, basically, if they're logged in. Then they can pick one or several of them, and when they select, you get a callback. To do this, it's just JavaScript code. So really, the two things that we have to do are create the picker, and customize it. In this case, we're just saying, I want to limit the view to Google Docs. I need to set a callback, and that callback is when the user clicks either select or cancel. We build it, and then whenever we want to make it visible, we just call the setVisible method. In our callback, what we get back is some detail about the action. Did they click submit? Did they click cancel? And if they picked something, what did they pick? And then for each item that they selected, you get back a bunch of details. You get back the URL of that item. You can get back the title, thumbnail images, descriptions, and there's some other cool stuff that you'll get, and I'll mention in a moment. But then you could do something with it, right? In this case, it's not doing anything interesting. It's just showing a message that they selected a doc. But once you have this information, you can send it to your server, or you can call one of the docs APIs to fetch that content and start processing it. One of the really cool things is that for every document that somebody shares with you, you get an access token. So this is an OAuth 2 access token that gives you the ability to go and fetch that content without asking for additional permissions. It's a short-lived token. It's only good for about 24 hours. And it's only valid for the document that the user shared with you. So if you're building an application and you're hesitant to ask the user for full access to all of their documents, this actually gives you a way for them to share individual documents with your app. So it's just a great way. Like if you're just worried about trust, it's really easy just to get selective access. So once we have that token, we can generate an ID, call our normal Google Docs API, and fetch that content. The whole UI for this is localizable. When you just load the library, you specify a language, and it will load those resources. And this actually works with not just Google Docs, but Picasa web albums, image search, video search. And so you could actually use it to do things like let people pick from their Picasa web albums to upload them into your application. So it's a really cool tool, and we're continuing to make improvements to it. The last part I want to talk about is distribution. So one of the things that we have is the Google Apps Marketplace. And this is not particularly new. It's actually been around for about 1.5 years. And for those who aren't familiar with it, it's a storefront for where people who are Google Apps users can find business applications that integrate with Google Apps. Some of the new things that we've added: we now have a feature where any user in a Google Apps domain can install an application for their own use. And by what we mean by install is that when they click add it to my domain, what they get is single sign-on with that application. In the bar atop all of Google Apps, where we have Gmail and Contacts and Calendar listed, that application then appears in that list. So it's just a click away for most users. And you get access to data, so people can integrate with Contacts and Calendar and so on. Previously, only administrators were allowed to install applications, and they had to install it for every user on their domain. Now it's open that any user can install it for personal use. We did start identifying staff picks, and we're doing this for 2 reasons. One is we want users to find what we think are really cool applications that are well integrated, really easy to use. But for developers, we also want to be able to point out the applications that we think are good examples of how to integrate with Google Apps. And so a lot of these developers, once they've been identified, we'll actually invite them to write blog posts so they can share some of their insights. And so there's already been a few of these up on our developer blog. We've made some improvements for developers, particularly around searching, so searches are more accurate. We've made search terms available for use in Google Analytics. So if you have a listing in the marketplace, it does integrate with Analytics. So we're improving the quality of the data that goes in and giving just people more insight into how their application is performing. To get in the marketplace, it's pretty easy. The main requirement is single sign-on. And this is single sign-on implemented with OpenID. So I mentioned your app gets listed in that menu. If I click on my application, instead of seeing a username and a password, I just want to get into the app. And again, to do that, we just use OpenID as a protocol. And again, a lot of these applications will integrate with all of our integration points. So I do want to wrap up. This is all part of our vision for 100% cloud, right? So I mentioned we have what we can contribute. We have our collaboration and our communication suites. but that's not enough. And so we need developers like yourselves to build those applications that companies need, whether or not those are for your own company, for your own use, or if you're selling applications for other customers. We obviously have a lot of tools. These are just a small sample of what's out there. These are just some of the newer ones. There actually are some really cool new ones coming probably in the next few weeks, things I would love to talk about that I think are really exciting, but just can't today. But keep your eyes open. And if you are building an application for businesses, for sale, definitely come talk to me about the Google Apps Marketplace. It is a really great distribution option to get your application in front of the 3 million businesses that are on Google Apps. And you saw how many people here, and basically everyone in the room, use Google Apps, and they're a potential customer of yours as well. If you would, actually the scheduling is a little bit different than when I made this slide, but I did have an OpenID talk earlier today for those who came. There is an AppScript talk, which goes into a lot more detail about Google AppScript from Saurabh, one of our colleagues. Definitely check it out if you're interested. Obviously, for the marketplace, you can just go to google.com/enterprise/marketplace to try it out. If you're all Google Apps users, check it out just to find if there's any applications out there that you think would be really helpful for yourself. If you're selling an app, check it out to see who your competitors are and how they're doing. Certainly docs and forums, our blog at googleappsdeveloper.blogspot.com, and then a few Twitter handles if you want to follow any of them. Google Apps Dev is our official Google Apps Developer Twitter account, but Ryan Boyd, who's one of the advocates, Scott McMullen is our product manager, and myself as well. And so with that, it's actually finished a little bit early, but certainly open it up for questions if anyone has any. Any questions? Or? All right, no questions. Is there anything else you would like to hear about? More demos? More APIs?
Well, I have a question.
Yeah.
For the graphics API, you can create a new graphic from a spreadsheet, but do you are able to modify an existing graphics with the API?
For charts?
For the charts, yes.
Yeah, those are live charts. So you can, once you run, you can just re-render it whenever you want. So in the case of that demo app, if I were to go in here and say, say I want to go to like a 10-year loan, it will just re-render that to the new data. So all it does is just render an image. And it's just an in-memory representation, and then you can decide what you want to do with it. So in this case, I'm rendering it as part of the web page, but you can convert it into an image, you can upload it to Google Sites, you can send it in an email, but basically whatever. And you can just, as that data changes, constantly update it.
And you can modify a chart that lives inside a spreadsheet?
Yeah, it would be a little tricky to do. You would have to create it initially with AppScript, but you can then have, you can add menu actions into a spreadsheet or just do it on a trigger. So you can actually do time-based triggers in AppScript. So you could say, update it nightly if you wanted to do it. So if you have a dashboard and you have all your stats in a spreadsheet, you would just do a time-based trigger and then just re-render it and put it in your dashboard. Yeah. So actually just I'll show you how I created this one. It's actually pretty easy. So the one weird thing about AppScript is it exists only within, I gotta remember which cheat it is. It only exists inside spreadsheets right now. So it's a little bit of a weird home for it. But that is changing. That is something that will actually get its own location for it. And this is actually a different document. And I can't find my application anymore. All right, maybe I won't show how I created this. Well, actually, let's just create one. We'll just create it on the fly here. So let's just do create new spreadsheet. So we'll create a really, really quick web page that has no content on it. Basically, all you have to do is go to Tools, Script Editor. And now I can just say, like, do get. Save it. And now I can share this. So I have sharing controls. And so I can, in this case, publish as a service. And I can set whether or not it's only available for me. So if I want to just use it during testing, I would just leave it at this, in which case I have to be authenticated. Or I can make it public. And if it's not anonymous, they have to be authenticated, in which case you can actually get that data. Or I can just open it up to everyone. And you can also turn it on and off. But once you do that, now it's actually live. This is actually live as a web page. It's not going to render anything because there's no UI. But then just a couple lines of code, you can start building UI components. And the UI is just GWT, so GWT. So you get all the same widgets. And you could use a UI builder, or you can just programmatically construct it. Yeah.
When I use AppScript with Google Sites, I found some limitations with UI creates, for example. Do you have a new version or new feature release for this?
This is getting updated constantly. I mean, they're pushing new features probably every other week. So have you reported a bug or posted in the forum?
It's not a bug. It's a limitation with gadgets, with duration, and creation of GUI into the Google Sites.
It should work. That's a pretty common use case. So if there is a problem, either I would suggest posting what problem you're running into to the forum, and the team is really good and they're very responsive, and so they'll help you with it. And if it is just a limitation, then they'll file an issue and try to help you resolve it. But it's you can actually take these UIs, and when they are published to sites, they're published as gadgets. So one of the things we want to do is, since we're already publishing as gadgets, is why not put those in Gmail and Contacts and Calendar as well? So that will improve. If there is a problem, it will get better.
I have another question.
Sure.
Using the Picker API that you showed previously, I'm thinking of is it possible? Let me try to get if I got the idea about it. You can, for instance, query for a user to show all their YouTube videos and select that video, and I'm going to be able to retrieve all the YouTube data about that video.
It doesn't do YouTube yet, but it does video search. Yeah.
All right. And you get some data so that you can create a YouTube player or a video player with that info?
You probably could. I haven't tried it, but actually, let's see if I have a GDD one. I don't know if this will actually work. I was working on just a sample app that would take Google Docs presentations and upload them to SlideShare.
I'm looking forward for a feature for a site I'm creating about people can share their stuff, and maybe they have some already videos on different providers like YouTube or Vimeo or whatever, and they want to search for their videos and select the ones that they already have in other accounts, so that they don't have to, for instance, just copy the URL and then I have to parse it. I was thinking of maybe if the Picker API could replace that.
Probably not yet, but hopefully not too soon, not too long from now. Yeah, so I mean, this is basically how it works. Is just going to be a little slow with the network, but you can see. I mean, I was playing a lot with my demos. I have a lot of these quote documents, but and right now I actually have this set so it only does documents. But if I were to go into now I can just go into the source and just say, add videos, and then you would see videos. Yeah, and if you just want to do videos, you can do that as well.
So the result comes from the video part of Google search.
Yeah. So it's the same as going to, Google.com, and then doing, videos. So that's the set of documents that you would search, and so the user can just do a search from within there. With Picasa, you can actually do like image upload as part of it. So if I don't actually have it in Picasa yet, there's actually I think an upload button that gets rendered where they can upload their photos to Picasa first, and then you get just a link to the hosted version. So it's it's a cool service. It's still very new. It's listed as experimental in our docs, but if you don't want to build your own UI for interacting with Google Docs or one of the search services, then it's a good option.
Yes, I don't want to get too sidetracked with this, so you let me know if I'm getting too out of the way with this. I saw in the APIs you mentioned that you have a prediction API.
Yes.
So how mature is it?
It was announced initially, not this past I/O, but the year before. And so we're on version 2 of it right now. It's pretty cool. I've played around with it a bit, and it's getting smarter. Starting like the new version, they basically started allowing incremental training is one of the newer features, which is just great because you don't have to keep retraining on huge data sets. And they're constantly working on improving accuracy. But if you can find Chris Schalk, he's presenting. I don't know if he presented today or if he's presenting tomorrow, but I think he has it in one of his talks. And either ask him or Wesley Chun. Very good resources for prediction. Yeah. Anything else? Yeah.
I guess it's a set of questions. Is it fair to think a strategy of a company to selling applications to build on top of AppScript and Google Apps? For example, regarding providing data warehouse services through Fusion tables, BigQuery, or stuff like that, for example?
It is viable. AppScript has one challenge in terms of building commercial products on it, which is the lack of IP protection. So when you share scripts with people, you're sharing the source. So it's a little hard to build commercial product. I mean, if you trust if you think people are going to be honest, you can do it, but you'll have some loss there, but it's not too bad. But that is something we're working. There's been a lot of interest from resellers and system integrators that build a lot of app scripts for their customers, and they want to be able to reuse those solutions and start selling them, and that's a use case that we're very anxious to address.
But besides, the bad part of it would be AppScript, but Fusion tables, it's secure to use it facing an external customer.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone has, but it's certainly doable. I'm trying to think who would be a good person to ask. There is somebody talking about. Actually, I don't know if the Geo session happened yet, but the Geo team is doing a lot with Fusion tables, and yeah. Okay. Yeah, if you can get them off, find them just offline and talk, then you might be able to get a little bit more detail. Yeah. Anything else? Or? Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Document and convert it to notebook data or whatever XML I want.
Yes.
Without going through each element in the document.
Yes, you can. So one of the types in AppScript is a blob, and both charts and docs are considered blobs. And one of the methods on there is a getAs method, and you basically just give it a MIME type. And if there's if it's a conversion that we support, then you can convert to that format. You basically just take whatever that object is, either the entire document, and say convert it to PDF. And that's exactly what I did for that demo. I just had the document. I said get as PDF or application/PDF, and it gave me back just the bytes for the document. I could have done whatever the MIME type is for Microsoft Word, and it would have given it to me as a Word document.
It's not the binary format like Microsoft Word or PDF. I mean, XML as a source format, as the text format, or any format I want to create.
You can't do custom formats, and there are some formats missing. So, for example, I wanted to originally do it as HTML, because you can part of the email APIs, you can send HTML content. But that is currently an unsupported format. It's a format you can do in Google Docs, but you can't do it in AppScript yet. And if you wanted to do it, you would have to implement the logic yourself. But there is a bug filed for that. Eventually, any doc format conversion you can do in Docs, you should be able to do in AppScript. Yeah.
Can I connect AppScript with a engine and another database?
What was it?
Can connect AppScript
Yeah.
with
Yeah. There's a URL fetch service. You can call any web service that's publicly accessible.
web service in general?
Yeah. And it actually supports OAuth as well. So if you have a OAuth protected API, you can call that within AppScript and take those results and do something with it. Yeah, I mean, there's actually some really complicated apps that people have built with AppScript. I kind of think of it more as like, not quite a toy, but better than a toy, but not quite a full platform. But be surprised what people build. They're actually building some really, really complicated applications just inside AppScript. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So it's a little bit early, but thank you all for. Actually, no, it's actually on time right now. So thanks for coming.